By the time Marshall finally found a cave up in the frosty mountains that was safe and bear-free, he was on his last legs. Exhaustion and pain had finally kicked in when he first touched the snow, and the large gash he had gotten earlier didn't help. He had done his best to clean it with his tongue, but without proper first aid, he wasn't going to last much longer. Lying in the cold, icy floor of the cave, Marshall did his best to get warm by huddling his body into a fetal position. His whimpers echoed amongst the cave as he lay there, hurt, cold, and tired. He had no way of getting out of there, especially with the snowstorm that was outside. It could take all day to get to Jake's without his truck, so he doubted he could survive out in there without a proper way to heal himself and stay warm. And worst of all, he had no means of contacting Ryder or the others for help. If they were searching for him, they would have no way of finding him. He left no clues to where he was going. No more denying one thought in Marshall's mind that made him more scared than ever in his life. I'm gonna die. Frozen tears began to stream down his face as the thought of his upcoming demise. He didn't want to die, but whatever option was there? He was going to either starve, freeze, or bleed out. Only a miracle could save him, and with that day, Marshall, he had doubted miracles were going to happen to him. No, it was best to make peace with the time he had left and already getting ready for his end. I'm going to miss everyone. I'm so sorry, Mom, Dad. I love you. I love you both so much. Ryder, I just wish I could tell you how much you meant as an owner and a friend. Rocky, Zuma, Rebel, Sky, all of you were the best friends I ever had. And I'm sorry for all the mistakes I made, including this one. Forgive me, Chase. Chase, his mind had drifted into a single day where he had shown his dedication to his best friend. It flashed back into two pups in a grave, a promise between the young boys who became brothers at every moment. I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise, Chase, thought Marshall, as he felt his eyelids grew heavier and heavier. With his vision going darker and darker, he saw a bright future heading towards him at the edge of the cave. It was tall and looked like it was stretching out his arms. An angel? Coming to take me away to puppy heaven? Marshall closed his eyes and accepted his fate as he was lifted from the cold. Dark earth carried into the air. He felt a warm wrap around a smile decorated on his face. His suffering had finally ended. Chase drove his car like hell itself behind him. He was sure that Sky was telling him to slow down, arguing though he was at dangerous speeds, but he didn't really care to listen to her or focus on anything else. All he cared about was getting to that crash site and finding Marshall alive or any hint of where he is. He wasn't dead. He refused to believe he was dead. Marshall had promised him that he wouldn't die and put Chase through any of kind of that worry and misery loss again. He knew that promise meant so much to them, and all he could think about was the day he made that promise. Aim! Fire! 21 guns fired into the air as taps were played by the trumpeter. A police squad over a dozen districts, including a small one in Adventure Bay, have saluted as the officers took out the American flag off of the closed casket. Chase wanted nothing more to do than to open again and looked at his father one last time, even if it was a stiff image of his face that would never open its eyes again. The flag was folded as 21 other police dogs all howled in mourning for their fallen brother. Everyone had told Chase over and over again his father died a hero, protecting the innocent from a bank robber's gun. Chase didn't want a hero. He wanted his dad back. He was still denying it. Even in his heart, his dad was immortal in his eyes. He wasn't supposed to die. Heroes never die. They come back after the day is saved. Always. Dressed in his black tux, he felt the entire body go numb as his father's human partner walked over with the flag and placed it in his hands and presented it to Chase. He stared at it for at least a minute, unable to lift up his paws or even stop his eyes from crying. Ryder's dad eventually took it and placed it next to Chase, who too watched the casket sink lower and lower into the ground until there was a thud. There it was. His father was gone, just like his mother. He was gone. At that moment, Chase ran as fast as he could through the cemetery, ignored for the calls and Ryder and everyone who had called out his name. He didn't want to listen to them, saying things that it would get better. It would never get better. How could it? he lost his parents and they were all dead. Losing his mother was hard, but she died when he was only a few weeks old, and all he could remember of her was just the summer fur of her smell. His father had been the only parent his entire life, and now he lost him. Blinded by tears and grief, Chase found himself slipping on a loose root, falling into a pile of mud. He didn't bother getting up. He just lay there and began crying. He wished that he could only sink into the earth to join his father in an eternal sleep, if only to end his pain in his heart. "Daddy?" Chase whispered as he closed his eyes, haunted by a peaceful face of his now deceased father. Chase didn't know how long he lay there in the mud, but it meant of nothing to him at the moment. The sun was setting. He could tell that much. If anything, he didn't mind just resting there forever. Someone will come looking for me. Maybe bring me back to the lookout? Chase didn't want to go back. Not when there's so many memories of his father were there. Of course, that begged the question, that was he going down to do now? "Chase! Hey, Chase!" shouted a voice in the twilight. "Marshall?" thought Chase. His ears perked up. He slowly got up from the mud, and his clothes were a complete wreck, as he saw his best friend emerge from the bushes, panting like he had been a 3-hour marathon. Marshall took a moment to gather his breath before he turned to Chase with a relieved smile. "There you are. Everyone's been worried," shouted Marshall. He rushed over and hugged Chase, despite Chase not hugging back. Marshall nuzzled his best friend. "Come on, let's head back. Plus, I think my parents are going to scold me for running off like that to look for you." "Leave me alone, Marshall," hissed Chase as he turned around. "I'm not going back. I want to be alone." Marshall whimpered as he stared at his best friend's back. "Chase," he lowered his head. "I'm sorry you lost your dad. I liked him a lot. We all did. My parents, Ryder, Mr. Ryder, all these other police units there. They loved your dad too. And he was an inspiration to all of them. I can understand that." "Understand?" shouted Chase as he tackled Marshall, pinning him to the ground. "You don't understand everything I'm feeling right now, Marshall. You still have a family. My dad was an entire family. With them gone, I'm all alone." Chase then leaked a few tears before returning to his rage. "I never knew my mom. She died soon after I was born. My dad's always been there for me, and I wanted him to watch me grow up to be like a police dog. But he can't because some trigger-happy bank robber killed him. Who do I have left, Marshall? Who?" "You have me," shouted Marshall, pushing him off, much to Chase's surprise, getting up. Marshall barked before shouting, "Darn it, Chase, you still have family who loves you. Maybe they're not related by blood, but..." His expression softened as his eyes began to get misty. "You're a brother to me, Chase, and I love you like one." Chase's eyes widened as his mouth dropped upon hearing this. "Marshall?" Rubbing his eyes, Marshall continued, "I hate seeing you like this, Chase. I want to help you, because your pain is my pain. I may have not been Trigger's son, but he was an uncle to me. We're all hurt by his death, Chase. Maybe it's different from your pain, but we're still sad." He walked over and hugged his stunned best friend. "Do you know what puppy heaven is?" No, Chase whispered, although he had heard of it. "It's a place where all good dogs go when they die. A place of peace, of internal happiness, where your parents are there, happy, as they're looking down at you right now, watching over you, always," said Marshall, as he gave Chase a small, soft smile. "I had a grandmother who died before I met you, and when she was gone, I was sad too. My mother told me that all of us will see her again when we go to puppy heaven, but we would have to wait for the time to come. We all live good and happy lives. That's because that's what they would want us to do." "That they do?" asked Chase, tearing up at this point. "But I miss them so much. How can I move on?" "By moving on with us together, Chase, if you let us," whispered Marshall. Chase felt a rump and fell in his rump and started to rub his eyes. Do you really want to be my brother?" "Only if you let me," replied Marshall. Chase thought of long before he nodded. "It's okay, but I want you to promise me one thing." "Anything," said Marshall, wagging his tail. "Don't die before I do." Marshall was taken a bit, but Chase continued, "I don't care what it takes, but I don't want you to die before I die. I can't go through another loss, Marshall. Please." Marshall was silent for a bit, but then smiled. I promise. Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. Wait, that shouldn't be hope not to die in this case. Chase laughed and a real smile, in the first of many days, appear on his face. Yeah, it would. The two brothers looked at each other and held their paw and touched to each other. Brothers? Asked Chase. Brothers. By the time Chase reached the wreck, the fire was already gone, but thanks to the ongoing rain, he leaped out of his seat and began barking over and over. Marshall! Marshall! Shouted Chase as he ran through the area, trying to follow even a small fur as he spotted the Dalmatian. Every time he turned his head, he grew afraid that he would see a dead body somewhere on the ground. He sniffed the air, trying to get a scent of Marshall, but could barely get anything. The fire must have burnt it away. Thankfully, he didn't smell a decaying corpse. Chase! Shouted Sky's voice as he saw her land nearby a helicopter. She rushed out, looking both furious and worried. What the heck's wrong with you? You could have gotten yourself killed the way you were driving. I was trying to find Marshall, shouted Chase, defending his actions. Look around you, Chase. Marshall is... Sky began to choke on her own words while already getting teared up. He's not dead, shouted Chase. So loud that the thunder above was muttered by his scream. Marshall's not dead. He wouldn't break his promise. Never! Nostrils flaring, he then told Sky and looked at him with fear, and he was shivering. Sense came back to him as he shook his head and looked away in shame. I'm sorry, Sky, but he can't be dead. There's no smell of death. And that way that truck is crashed, it had to come from above. Sky did indeed look at the truck, which landed the front first into the earth. Looking up, he saw a cliff above. Arf! Wings! Her jet pack opened up in her pup pack, and she flew over towards the cliff. Chase watched as she flied up and cursed himself for yelling at her. His father would have told him the most important thing: a police dog has to remain calm and professional at all times. And I haven't done a very good job, have I? Chase felt exhaustion and slowly overcome him. Everything had happened to the last few hours, and it's slowly breaking him. He didn't know how much he could take. But I have to keep going. I have to find Marshall. He had to find Marshall and apologize to him, knock him to the head for leaving, and then hug him and say how much he loved his brother. Chase, I found paw tracks. Marshall must have jumped out of his truck before it crashed, shouted Sky's voice in his communicator tag. And at that moment, Sky's voice felt like an angel of hope. Chase sparked and said, Great work, Sky. I'll be up there in a moment. He turned to his pup pack. Rough zipline. With the compartment of his zipline opened up, he shot out the cliff before using it to bring him up. Reaching the top, Chase carefully climbed up until he reached the road, where Sky was waiting for him. He saw the tracks and then sighed with relief. He's alive, Chase. He's alive. Sky smiled and nodded. Then let's keep going. Wait, said Chase, making up her pause and look around, nervously as he rubbed the back of his head with his paw. I'm sorry I yelled at you. It was wrong. Sky then gave a soft smile before walking over towards Chase and nuzzling him. It's okay. I know you're worried about Marshall. We'll find him, Chase. Chase then blushed a bit, but soon reminded himself he was on a mission. Now it was not the time to be thinking about such thoughts. He lowered himself to the ground and began to use his nose to follow the scent of Marshall's tracks had left off. He found himself making a nearby cave, not too far from where they have landed. It was dark and very deep, and the kinds of caves as he and Jake sometimes like to explore on occasion. Rough flashlight. His compartment opened up with his tool, instantly flashed a beam of light into the sky where he fell upon something. Upon seeing what it is, both pups froze at the sight of a large bear upon it with its mouth. Sky screamed. It was Marshall's tag, bloody and chewed up. The bear roared in fury. Before Chase knew it, he was screaming and charging forward.